We're just getting started. There are many of you on the phone, some of you on. There are 12 of you on, which is great. And I think in some places there are more than one of you at the phone or the computer screen. For those of you who don't know my voice, this is Adira Levin speaking, and on behalf of myself, Braden Manns in Calgary, and the Vancouver team here, Heather, Graham, and Grace, as well as Heather and Kathy and Helen. We are really excited to be able to have this first ever Funders Forum of the CanSolve CKD Network. I'm going to pause and just make sure that you're all muted, but if you can't hear or something comes up, if you can just send a chat message, that will be very good, and you can see it there in the bottom right-hand corner of your screens. And that way, we'll go there. We'll be able to hear you without too much ado. So what we would like to do actually is have this opportunity to present to you where we are with CanSolve CKD, but also give you an opportunity to ask questions and points of clarification. These things done virtually are never as good as sitting together in a room. Nonetheless, I think certainly is better than everybody traveling to somewhere. So here we are. So without any further ado, I'm going to get started. I'm assuming that all of you have the slides and can see them on your screen. Or Braden says he can. Good. Well, yes, Braden, great. Braden, did you want to also say something to start?
Welcome, everyone. I'm sure there'll be time for questions at the end, so Adira, take it away.
Great. So this is the first ever Funders Forum, which is an opportunity for you as our partners in this amazing network and endeavor to hear what we've been up to for the first year and ask questions. It's not moving, Graham. Oh. So CanSolve CKD Network is, as you all know, a national patient-oriented kidney research network. It's funded by the Canadian Institute of Health Research. That was the original call, but thanks to all of you, more than about 30 partners. And I think for those of you that have logos, they're up there, and if you don't have a logo, it's not, but we haven't forgotten you. It's one of 5 chronic disease networks that's established by the National Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research. And I think, as you can see, we're proud of our little logo. It stands for Canadians Seeking Innovative Solutions to Chronic Kidney Disease. And it is, as I said, a network along with the other 5 chronic disease networks. We have over 150 network members. Patients and their families living with kidney disease, researchers, healthcare providers, administrators, and policymakers. This org chart has patients at their center because that is truly the reason that we're here. The patients, their families, and caregivers form the Patient Council. We also have an Indigenous Peoples Engagement and Research Council. And they really are the core of everything and why we're here. There are a number of different committees to try and ensure that we get some of the work done, and from a governance perspective, we have a steering committee, and then there's you, our funders. Our vision is that by 2020, every Canadian with or at high risk for chronic kidney disease will receive the best recommended care, experience optimal outcomes, and really have the chance to participate in studies with new treatments and with new strategies as well. Patients are really our partners in all the different aspects of research, and patient engagement, as I said, is one of the key and fundamental purposes of these networks. But the patients are our partners not just in by participating in the studies, but actually participating in study design, their execution, ideally their interpretation when they're done, and actually the result communication and so much more. And at this particular point, I'd like to pause and just ask Mike McCormick, who is the lead of our patient council, to say a few words before I continue. Mike, can you come on? Oh, is he there? Sorry, we're just unmuting everybody because I can't tell who's who because some people are on the phone.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Adira?
Yeah, now I can. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, perfect. Hi, welcome everyone. So my name is Michael McCormick. I'm one of the 3 co-chairs of the National Patient Council for CanSolve, and I just wanted to give you a quick summary of what we've accomplished in the first year. So some of it Adira has already touched on, but we, right from the get-go in the initial submission, we had 3 co-chairs named on our grant proposal to CIHR. And from there, we've grown what is our patient council, so our core patient council, to about 30 members. And of that, we have 9 Indigenous members, and we have 1 person that represents projects specifically focusing on young persons. The patient council also has fairly broad geographical coverage, so we're still a little bit light, and we are looking to expand the council with representation through the prairies and also on the East Coast, as well as Northern Canada. So while we look to keep the number at about 30 people, we will be accepting people from those other geographical regions to make sure that we are representing people from coast to coast to coast. In terms of the function of the patient council, Adira referenced our 3 working groups, which are actually at this point merging down to 2 working groups. So the working groups are research projects and study recruitment, which is now that we're through sort of the more startup and administrative part of the project, this group is really going to be a key part of shepherding the projects along in terms of engaging patients and getting the actual research part of the projects done. Our knowledge translations, communication, and outreach working group, again, will be key as we move along in the projects. And our third one, the curriculum and training working group, was really key in the first year of providing the necessary training to get patients trained in the world of research. Many of us don't come from that professional background, so this was a key component of bringing patients up to speed for the research world, as it were. The patient network beyond the patient council now is around 75 members, and that will continue to grow as we engage patients for the individual projects. In terms of the 18 projects themselves, we have several of the projects now have patient co-leads, and as the projects move into a more operational mode, we will look to have a patient co-lead on all of the projects. And then looking forward to the future or beyond the first year, we have started our succession planning for the patient executive. So as all of us are dealing with not only kidney disease but work commitments and other life commitments, we've identified that it's important to keep moving the patient executive along through maturity. So one of our initial co-chairs, Kate Chong, has recently had a transplant and has stepped aside from the executive patient council, and she has indicated that she will like to stay on as part of the patient council and part of the patient network going forward. Leah Getchell, through a voting process that we have outlined in our terms of reference, was selected to replace Kate, and she will become our lead co-chair in due course. And probably the most recent advancement, I would say, is that we are now starting to get non-CanSolve researchers reaching out to us, recognizing that the patient council has a certain amount of expertise in the world of strategic patient-oriented research, and so we are now starting to look at ways to expand our scope so that we can continue even beyond the scope of CanSolve and the time horizon of CanSolve to continue to have patients as a key part of research in Canada going forward. So on behalf of our patient council and our full patient network, I wanted to thank all of the funders for allowing us to do what we do, and I think I can speak on behalf of all of the patient council that this is a tremendous learning experience, but something that we're all personally invested in, and we're very motivated to keep this work going. So thank you all.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike, and thanks for giving us an overview of where we are with the Patient Council. I think all of you as funders know the uniqueness of this entire endeavor is really, as that picture that I showed you earlier demonstrates, that patients really are at the center and heavily involved in all of the things that we do, which is a great segue to just what have we done in this last year. So in this first year and a bit, what we've done is focus on building the foundation with the core operations team and putting in place a number of structures and processes, because as Mike alluded to, we have 18 projects, which I'll get to in a moment, and 5 core infrastructures that this network is trying to support. We've designed a governance model, recruited the patient partners and committee members for most, if not all, of the projects. As I said, the core operations team. We've done a lot of patient-oriented research training for both the patients as well as the investigators, which I think is a key thing and one of the key aspects of success. And although it sounds like only one bullet, the last one of developing and signing the institutional funding agreements has really been a massive undertaking. Despite everyone's excitement about this, the various institutions have not previously had to deal with such a complex network, and so getting everything signed off, sealed, delivered, and money transferred has been quite an undertaking, and I thank everyone for their patience on that. The council, as Mike already alluded to, consists of 29 or 30, depending on the moment. The working groups we've already discussed, and the patients as partners on the project teams, and 7 of the 18 research projects actually have designated named patient leads, which is again a remarkable feat and something quite novel in the world of research, and certainly of kidney research. We have an Indigenous Peoples Engagement and Research Committee. And I think that this is an important recognition of ensuring that the voice of Indigenous peoples is heard throughout the various projects, with some of them specifically focused. We have developed a training curriculum, or are developing a training curriculum on Indigenous cultural safety, and working towards the implementation of some of the Indigenous focused research projects, with a lens and an understanding that the ones that are not specifically focused still have relevance and are applicable. We've hosted 2 training workshops with 55 network members who completed some modules that have been created to ensure a true understanding of what the meaning of a patient-oriented research commitment is. And we're actually developing additional training curricula. CIHR has 3 of these modules. Importantly, in a funny way, CanSolve is ahead of the creation of those modules, and it's actually helping to inform and modify. So we're happy, and as Mike says, people have come to us as a model of a number of different things that we've put in place. Believe it or not, after a year, we've only completed 8 of the 10 host institution funding agreements. 14 of the 18 projects are funded as of March 31st. All of the core infrastructure, but importantly, we are the first spore chronic disease network to advance the funds to our project, just giving you an understanding of how complex some of this is. We now, according to Heather, the update as of between the slides being made yesterday and today have 17 of the 18 research projects up and running, so that's pretty exciting. As you can see, I think if you go to our webpage and look around, we really have increased the network profile and visibility through the amazing work of Graham. The communication materials, the presentations all have a look and feel that's very modern but also very uniform. We have a webinar series which you are always invited to, which is usually at 4 o'clock Pacific time on a Wednesday. I think it's approximately once a month, and there is a schedule that you can find on our website, and that's where the projects, including the project leads and patient leads, present for about 15 to 20 minutes in-depth reviews of their projects, and happy to answer any questions. They're also stored so you can go back and look at them if you haven't seen them. And the other thing that we've done, and Mike alluded to this, is ongoing patient recruitment, not just for the studies, but also for participation in the various activities. There are 3 research themes: identifying kidney disease earlier and supporting those at highest risk, defining the best treatments to improve health and quality of life, and delivering innovative patient-centered treatment and care. The 18 research projects are graphically described here in the context of those 3 themes. And I guess just to highlight some of the research that's getting done, the living donor transplantation, we've done a national survey, embarking on a national survey study that measures the efficiency of living donor candidate evaluation. Many of you might know that despite a lot of willingness, as one of our patient partners said, it's easier to convert to a different religion than it is to donate a kidney in Canada. And therefore, the process is quite slow. And so if we're trying to increase that mode of improving people's access to the best therapy, then we really need to have some measurements of the efficiency and then how to make it better. And so it's not about just access, but actually the process itself that needs to be improved. And so that's being done in an evidence-based, methodologically sound fashion. We're also, the ACHIEVE study is recruiting patients for a randomized controlled trial of an old-fashioned therapy called spironolactone to see whether we can reduce cardiac or heart-related deaths in people with kidney disease who are already on dialysis. It's not a medicine that's usually been used in dialysis patients, and yet it has a lot of effectiveness in other populations. So we want to see in a randomized control fashion whether or not that would improve outcomes. And then Brenda Hemmelgarn, her team, and others are working on improving patient self-management, looking at specific tools that are available with early kidney disease and conducting focus groups to figure out what are the best preferences and needs of not just the people living with kidney disease, but also their partners and caregivers. So at this point, because he's the health economist in the team, I'm going to pass it over to my co-chair, Braden, who's based in Calgary. And Braden, if you can sort of take us through where we sit with the research budget and how that's broken up. So I'll...
Absolutely, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, very well.
Excellent. I'm a health economist, but I can't balance my budget at home, so not sure why I've been given the privilege of presenting these slides. I guess I would just remind people as well, Adira highlighted 3 projects. I think the impressive thing about Can Solve CKD in my mind is that patients have been involved for years in advance of CIHR advancing funds for this network, and the projects that were selected were patient priorities that came out of exercises to determine what they thought were the most important research questions. And some of the core infrastructures that we've been able to put in place and fund, like the National Clinical Trials Network, like a knowledge user and knowledge translation committee, it's made up of, chaired by Rebecca Harvey and Joanne Koppel, a medical lead of the Saskatchewan Renal Program. Some of these projects just could not be done without a partnership of renal programs. And so when we often think of doing your little pilot project through operating grant funds, what we've been able to do with this national network is look at the ability to scale and spread some innovations and test to see if they're actually effective across multiple provinces. So Adira's highlighted some that are really relevant across the country but are being done at a scale that wouldn't have been possible previously with operating grant support. So the numbers will be, these really should be considered very preliminary numbers. As Adira was mentioning, in the first year it was really building up the core infrastructures, getting all the contracts in place. And as I think the patients have learned as well, there's many, it takes a while to get a project going. You need to finish your study protocol, you need to get ethics, all of that needs to be in place before funds can actually be advanced to university. And many of these projects, it's not just that universities don't want to set up a contract, but money flows from multiple partners to the University of British Columbia, or sometimes the partner funds go directly to the local investigator, but then the funds will go to a host university, and then they will have to be disseminated out to other universities, and that's been a huge roadblock. Typically that doesn't happen in the context of research grants. Funds always stay at the host institution. And that's been one of the things that slowed things down, but it doesn't mean that progress hasn't been made from a research perspective in that first year. But you'll see that the first year actually ended on March 31st, 2017, and really we started getting set up in late June of 2016. So contracts actually started getting signed in January. So there wasn't much opportunity to spend money in that first year, really just a couple of months, and just a few projects were actually accepting, a few universities were accepting funds. So in the first year, we planned to spend around $7 million, including cash and in kind. We were only able to spend just under $1 million by March 31st, 2017. But if you press one more button, $2.2 million has been spent in the subsequent 4.5 months after March 31st, and sites are now getting set up and are really starting to spend money, and having had the privilege of holding several team grants. That is sort of how it has always worked with us. You're never able to ramp up spending. You need to hire people. You need to get things through ethics. So the first year really is a getting set up year, and then funding always, the ability to spend money always accelerates in year 2 and year 3. So we're quite pleased that all of these contracts are now set up, and we're starting to spend the money according to the plans that were in place at the start. Next slide. Just in terms of where the money has gone, I think you'll find that these numbers, the proportions of the pie that are spent on research, will significantly change in the next year, because as was mentioned, a lot of what we were able to do in the first year, get the core infrastructures going, so the management and administration, that won't be 21% in the next year. This is going to shift to a largely purple pie, but we've also spent money on stakeholder engagements. I think that includes training programs, and so you'll see this pie change over time. Next slide. Okay, so, oh, there we go, yes. So, I mean, people on the phone today at these partner funding agencies, you will see, I thought there was a slide that how much CIHR was paying. That might be the next slide, or maybe we skipped over one. But CIHR there, thank you, and then we'll go back from there. So CIHR is providing important funding, but actually they're not the majority of funding. They're providing 31% of the funding, cash or in kind, for CanSolve CKD. The total funding is around $40 million. Because some of the researchers already had operating grants, or actually were able to turn CanSolve CKD funding into additional CIHR funds. There's some additional CIHR money in the light green. But really importantly, why it's been so important to have partners on board is almost 60% of funding, well, 60% of funding is coming from partners, the people who are on the phone today. And in research, it's really become so important to leverage funds. And I can tell you that although this says $40 million right now, there's been a lot of enthusiasm from researchers who want to engage with patients within our patient council and who are applying for funds. And the fact that they're able to say that they're getting input from patient partners within CanSolve CKD and they're taking advantage of the core infrastructures will enhance their ability to get funding. So this $40 million will continue to increase. I'm confident of that. Not just the partners funding 60% of CanSolve CKD, but the partners have the ability to help us advance projects and for us to help them evaluate projects so that they will be better able to understand how to care for outcomes to improve care for patients to improve outcomes in the future. Next slide, or perhaps it's back. So if we just look at where the partner funding comes from, the largest section, almost $15 million, is coming from health research funding organizations like Alberta Innovates, or their partner organizations in BC and Manitoba, like the Ontario Renal Network and other renal programs across the country. Charitable foundations, Kidney Foundation has been a huge and positive partner for CanSolve CKD, and that charitable foundations have been very generous to this. We've had private donors, we've had pharmaceutical companies, we've had universities and professional associations also contribute. So there's lots of diversity in partner funding. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so we already covered this slide, and I think we are now at the point where we've left half an hour for questions. We've got Mike, we've got several of the other patient council co-chairs on the phone. We'd be happy to answer questions about progress or questions about any specific finance questions you have. So I'll pass it back to you, Adira, to...
And I guess I think also you've all seen the report, and that is available too. So
that usually happens.
So you all also have the annual report, which goes in much greater depth than this high-level overview. Our intention this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you are, this morning, was really to give you this higher-level overview to complement that more thick and extensive annual report that you have, but then also to give you an opportunity to ask questions of any or all of us that are on the phone that are part of the CanSolve family, including patients and others. So I'll just open it up to the floor. If you're not talking, if you can mute your phone just because there's a lot of background noise with so many people on it, that would be great. But do, and if you, yeah, so any questions or comments that people want to make? Lydia? No?
Yes, I have a question. It's Andre Mummy.
Yes.
Yes, I think you referred earlier to 17 of the 18 research projects are up and running, and you also mentioned, and I think you referred to a network profile or website. Is that where we can have access to the different projects that have started? Just trying to understand where we can access more information about the projects themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you see on that final slide, www.cansolveckd.ca, that's our website. If you go there, there's actually a lay summary, a nice précis of each of the different projects that you can actually read there, as well as something about each of the core infrastructures and how to contact people. So there's also the webinars that are, as I referenced, stored on that website so that you can hear people talk about the project, not just read about them. So yeah, thank you for reminding me to remind all of you that that there's a plethora of information available on the website.
Thank you.
The other thing I would say, Andre, can you hear me again? I'm not sure if we're muted. Is that even the project, Dr. Gilbert's project, which we haven't been able to advance funds to yet, he has funding and he's moving that project forward. He's not making progress because of that. So all of the other projects have been advanced funding. Some of the projects are also sending out newsletters. So if you have specific projects that you're interested in, just emailing Graham, and he can let you know if they're disseminating newsletters, and you can start receiving those.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Other questions or comments? I appreciate that it's not that easy on a webinar of this size to sort of get a conversation going. I guess that, if it didn't come across, I think that, and I think Braden said it, and this slide says it, I mean, thank you really is a little bit of a small word to actually express really the excitement that we all have and how grateful we are that so many of you stepped forward in all the different ways to help support these projects. I think as part of our vision, I think the other thing to make sure of it, and Braden alluded to it, we're actually trying to change the culture of research in Canada and the care that we provide in a way that hasn't been done before. It's a pretty tall order, but it's this kind of a network that can actually get us there. So, hence the need for this kind of money and this kind of coordination and action.
It's Bruce Acton with St. Paul's Hospital Foundation in Saskatoon. Can I ask a question? So it has to do, we're a funder, and it has to do with publicity around locally or regionally on each of the projects. What sort of communications has been done to promote each of these patient-oriented research activities in regions or communities across the country, and what's acceptable practice?
I think it's very project-specific, and there are custom-made flyers and various other things that allow us to promote the specific project. For the projects, for example, that you've funded, then I would suggest that if you speak to Joanne Tappel, she'll actually be able to tell you where they're at and how they're promoting the entire network as well as the specific project. I hope I'm answering your question. Is that?
Yeah, well, part of it, I'm looking at it from a funder's point of view too. We'd like to know people to know that we provided funding to this project and the important work that it hopes to accomplish. And and I know that early on in year one, people were discouraged from making any announcements about it, but there hasn't been much communication about what can be done, regionally to promote this, the funding partnerships and that sort of thing.
It's a great point. So this slide deck, if you go back to one of the third slide that I showed that had all the logos on it, I suppose that's something we have promoted the extensiveness, and I think each of the funders could then take that, blow up their own logo, and help to demonstrate the importance of that in the greater network.
And we can help with that.
And we can help with that if you would like us to, if there's something specific.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. It's Braden here. Initially, CIHR wasn't allowing us to even announce that the network was funded. That's definitely not the case anymore. Graham, who's our communications expert, has really acted to amplify any media that has happened around specific projects, and there's been media around transplant, around Allison's diabetes and Indigenous children project in Manitoba, and so Joanne, it would be good to have a discussion with Joanne and see where she's at, because often getting the message out about the project, it depends where the project's at and what they have to share. But I think that's where, if it started locally and then Graham can help to amplify through the social media channels and through his networks with other media. So that's sort of how we've seen it, as opposed to, although in the context of the meeting, I think we've been looking and we have done some media, but it's tended to focus on the high-level network and 3 or 4 project examples. But you're right, we should be tooting the horn of the local funders and partners.
Okay. All right, good. I'll speak to Joanne.
Somebody's asked a question about what the biggest challenge for year 2 is. And I think it's not, I mean, it's always a challenge, but I think it's really to get all the projects up, running, and launched. As Braden said, the ethics for most of them is done. There are some details to work out in some of the implementation across different provincial boundaries, et cetera. However, we really are excited about year 2 and really getting our feet in and doing some of the work that we've all been excited about doing it. The other challenge, go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, Mike McCormick, if you're still on the phone, do you want to talk about I mean, it's a paradigm shift for patients to work with researchers, and researchers are just like other humans. They don't want to change. I think we started to see some of that culture change, but do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So, I mean, it's definitely, for the patients, it's been an evolution right from the, I think I recall having a very frank discussion with Adira after our first meeting. So this was in Montreal in 2015, I believe, and basically at the point where we were still trying to get the grant proposal together, and we broke out into a number of focus groups in smaller rooms, and I said to Adira at lunch, I said, I don't know, like the talk is going way over my head. Like I don't know. Like I don't really feel like I'm contributing or following the conversation or contributing. And she said, the first thing you have to understand is that the language and the attitudes of researchers and physicians is modified just by having patients in the room. And that was eye-opening to me, in the sense that you know, I didn't know what I didn't know because I'd never been involved in something like this. But obviously Adira's perspective, having been in these types of meetings with and without patients, the culture change just by having patients present in the room was tangible. And then as the CanSol project has matured, I've found even just the language that we speak to each other in has really changed, in that researchers are becoming much more comfortable and more naturally speaking in terms that the entire room can understand, the patients and the researchers. So I think, yeah, I don't know if that covered exactly everything, Braden, but I think in short, I think the culture change is palpable, and yeah, we just look forward to keep moving along with our momentum.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that was, I mean, I think that some teams are doing it extremely well, and others are just still trying to figure out what patients can contribute and constantly are surprised, wow, I didn't think of that. I didn't think they'd be able to contribute that. So I think some people are stepping lightly still, but many of the teams have really incorporated patients. But that'll be an ongoing challenge. It's not what we're used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the fact that we have like accessible summaries of all the projects, that we're really trying hard, both in our slide presentations as well as all of our other communications, to make the language accessible. And I think I also said to you, Mike, that our dirty little secret is that half the time the researchers in the room don't understand what the other researchers are saying. They just nod their head and smile, because we don't all research in the same world of basic science or clinical science. So it's been a very good education for all of us to make all of our respective interests accessible to our colleagues, and we think of the patients as our colleagues. Are there other questions that people want to ask or comments?
Yes, it's Martin Monger from Kidney Foundation, Quebec branch. Do you hear me well?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. May I ask, what is the plan? Do you have plan to have communication in French, to have more participation about patients and researcher in Quebec area, but across Canada too, in with French language speaking?
Short answer is yes, that's all about time and resources, and maybe offline we can talk to you about how we could work with you more closely. Kidney Foundation, the national branch, does most of its communication in English and French, and maybe Graham, you can speak to some of what we're doing. The brochure and the website, I think, are. Go ahead.
That's right. Yeah, we do have a French version of our website available, as well as a French brochure that sort of has some of our core information about the network and its research priorities. So, as Adira was mentioning, you know, we would be more than happy to work with you on developing something that's more targeted at patient recruitment, or that you know, maybe has a little bit more detail about some of the specific projects that may be of interest to a Francophone population.
But if you haven't seen the French brochure, we can make sure that Chantal has them. Chantal Boucher at Kidney Foundation in Montreal has the French brochures. So maybe that would be a good thing for you at the Quebec branch to be able to have access to more freely.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I mean, if there aren't other questions, I mean, it would be great to get some feedback either afterwards by email or right now, in terms of if people have had a chance to look at the annual report that Graham designed, the internet web-based report. Was that helpful, the slides that we presented? Is this an annual report back to our partner funders? Is there something else we could be doing to keep you up to date?
Hello, it's Nicole from Research Manitoba, and I found the updates very helpful. I found the presentation very helpful as well. Thank you for that, and all the information that's come through so far. I have visited the website. I try and check in every once in a while and kind of see what's going on, and the platform I find is very easy to navigate and very easy to use, and I really appreciate the way you are presenting information and keeping us updated. And I think that comes through as part of you having the patient engagement, that you are approaching it in a way that is so accessible, as opposed to a more static kind of standard research proposal and annual report and updates. So I just wanted to say thank you, that I do appreciate the way that it's being presented and the way that you keep in touch with funders and the public as well with information. And we actually had a launch here yesterday, where our minister and U of M and Research Manitoba had a launch for the 4 sport projects that we're a part of, including CanSolve, and there was a patient that spoke of her involvement with the program, and her feedback was fantastic, and she really felt heard and appreciated the way that this project is taking form. So it was great to see just someone actually a part of it really engage with it. So I just want to give a kudos to the team for doing that kind of work.
Thanks very much. And yeah, I think that's really warming to hear. And I think we take this very seriously. It's not just words.
Yes, and that's exactly what comes through.
Yeah. Thank you. And that beautiful work you see is really the brainchild of Graham. Really is an amazing ability to translate from patient and researchers into visual and words, things that are very accessible to everybody. So I think we really owe him a great debt.
And thank you. And that's a great example, actually, of I read that on Facebook last night because Graham had sent a bunch of images in the story that came out of Manitoba yesterday. So that's the kind of amplification that Graham can do to the rest of the network and beyond.
Yeah, and I guess it goes without, well, as I said before, we're changing the culture of Canadian health and research, particularly in the kidney domain. If we're really successful, then it has a ripple effect into other parts of research, not just kidney disease. And I think as everyone on this phone call realizes that people with kidney disease have multiple other conditions as well, so diabetes, heart disease, and other groups. We're also trying to work out ways to work with them so that we really change the culture of the way that we provide care and generate evidence. So it's 45. I mean, 45 minutes for an adult attention span is pretty terrific, especially in the middle of people's week. As Braden said, I think if you do have any other questions or comments, please feel free to email us. You'll find all of us very accessible. There's Heather's phone number as well as her specific email address are there on the screen as well. And again, do visit the website. You can find a lot of answers to your questions there, I think. And to Mike and Kathy and all the other patient partners, thank you very much for all that you do to contribute to making this such a success.